It began with a resignation video so dramatic, so unexpected that even her harshest critics paused for a moment. When Marjorie Taylor Greene, one of the most loyal foot soldiers in the MAGA universe, suddenly announced she was walking away from Congress, the political world froze. It wasn't just the decision, it was everything hidden between the lines. The emotion, the frustration, the sense of betrayal, and the unmistakable feeling that something inside the MAGA machine had snapped. But that wasn't even the real shock. The real shock came the moment Donald Trump opened his mouth. His reaction wasn't sympathetic. It wasn't supportive, it wasn't even neutral, it was something else entirely, something colder, sharper, and impossible to ignore. And that's when people began asking the question no one thought they'd ever ask. What happens to the MAGA movement when its most loyal soldier finally walks away? Today, we break it all down, what happened, why it matters, and what this explosive fallout reveals about the future of the Republican Party. Because trust me, this story is much deeper than a resignation. It's a warning flare. Marjorie Taylor Greene's resignation didn't just land like a breaking news alert, it hit Washington like a political earthquake. No leaks, no early rumors, no slow buildup. Just a sudden, emotionally charged video that felt less like a politician stepping down, and more like someone finally breaking free after holding their breath for far too long. From the first few seconds, it was clear this wasn't a standard farewell. Greene wasn't thanking colleagues or listing legislative accomplishments. She wasn't spinning her exit as a strategic career shift. Instead, she delivered a speech overflowing with frustration, disillusionment, and a raw honesty even her harshest critics didn't expect. Her message was unmistakable. She was done being used. She talked about loyalty turning into a trap, about political threats coming from the very man she once defended relentlessly. She described the MAGA machine as something that chews people up the moment they stop being convenient. Her line about refusing to be a battered wife wasn't subtle. It was a direct shot at the pressure and intimidation she said she endured behind the scenes. But the moment that made everyone's eyebrows shoot up was her claim that powerful forces were lining up to replace her: neocons, billionaire donors, foreign influences, and what she called the political industrial complex. She framed her exit not as surrender but as survival. And instantly, rumors exploded. Some insiders whispered that she was quietly preparing for a Senate run in 2026. Others speculated she might be rebuilding her brand for a 2028 presidential bid. A few suggested she simply couldn't fight Trump's political machine anymore. Nothing is confirmed, but the timing, tone, and tension said enough. Greene wasn't escaping Congress, she was escaping someone. And the real drama was only just beginning. If Greene's resignation video stunned Washington, Trump's reaction froze it solid. People expected tension, they expected awkwardness, maybe even a carefully worded statement pretending everything was fine. But no one expected the blunt, almost dismissive tone that came out of Trump's mouth the moment reporters asked for his thoughts. "I think it's great news for the country." "It's great," he said, with the same casual tone someone might use to comment on a football score. No gratitude, no acknowledgement of her loyalty, no sign he understood the political shockwaves her announcement had just triggered. And it didn't stop there. When ABC's Rachel Scott asked if Greene had given him a heads-up before resigning, Trump brushed it off instantly. "Nah, it doesn't matter." Those 4 words said more than the entire resignation video. To her supporters, it screamed indifference. To his critics, it confirmed everything they'd always argued about his transactional nature. And to Greene, it felt like the final confirmation that whatever relationship they once had was over. But then came the line that set social media on fire. "There's a rift between me and her, not her and me." It was a sentence that sounded like it was trying to be clever but landed like a riddle with no answer. Analysts replayed it. Pundits mocked it, supporters tried to interpret it. No one could agree what Trump meant, but everyone agreed what it revealed. He wasn't hurt. He wanted people to think he wasn't hurt, instead of addressing her claims. Instead of denying the political threats. Instead of thanking her for years of unwavering support, he chose distance, coldness, dismissal. It was the kind of response that didn't just close a chapter, it lit the whole book on fire. And it raised a question that only got louder from here. If this is how he treats his most loyal ally, what happens next? By the time people finished watching Greene's resignation video, one question hung in the air like smoke. What actually happened behind the scenes? Because her tone didn't sound like a politician stepping away on her own terms. It sounded like someone who had been pushed hard. The fracture didn't happen overnight. According to Greene, the real breaking point came when she dared to criticize Trump, something she had almost never done publicly. She called out powerful men who had harmed vulnerable girls and suggested Trump was shielding them. For someone who had spent years defending him no matter what, this was the moment she stepped out of line. And according to political watchers, Trump did not appreciate it. Greene later claimed that after her criticism, political threats started swirling around her. She said Trump and his inner circle were prepared to dump millions into a primary against her, not because of policy disagreements, but because she showed even a hint of independence. She described the situation like being punished for telling an uncomfortable truth. But the deeper you look, the stranger the picture becomes. Reports claimed Trump's top advisors had been growing frustrated with Greene's unpredictability. Rumors suggest major donors started distancing themselves after she broke from the MAGA script. Some conservative insiders even whispered that Greene had become too volatile in private meetings. None of this is confirmed, but the pattern feels familiar. Greene also claimed that something larger was moving against her: billionaire donors, foreign interests, old guard Republicans, and what she called the political industrial complex. She hinted that the MAGA world had been infiltrated by people who wanted her gone. Whether that's true or exaggerated, the message was clear: she didn't feel protected anymore, she didn't feel valued, and she didn't feel safe staying in Trump's shadow. Greene wasn't just resigning. She was escaping a political storm she believed would only get worse. Greene's downfall inside the MAGA universe didn't come out of nowhere. It came from a pattern so familiar that even Republicans who won't admit it publicly can recite it by heart. Because in Trump's world, loyalty isn't a bond. It's a bargain, and the moment the bargain stops benefiting him, everything collapses. Greene wasn't the first loyalist to discover that. She simply became the newest name on a long list of people who learned the hard way how quickly Trump cuts loose anyone who stops being useful. Take Ronna McDaniel, the former head of the RNC. She spent years defending Trump, pushing his claims, and shielding him from scandal after scandal. But after GOP losses, he blamed her for everything, publicly humiliating her, despite the fact that she spent nearly her entire political career trying to protect him. Or Michael Cohen, Trump's personal fixer for over a decade. Cohen took risks, handled secrets, and even faced legal consequences for Trump. And yet when things got messy, Trump didn't just distance himself, he erased him from history, pretending he barely knew him. Then there's Rex Tillerson, once described as the billionaire Secretary of State who brought stability to the administration. Trump later called him dumb as a rock. Mike Pompeo, his other Secretary of State, had his security clearance revoked. Kayleigh McEnany, once praised as his favorite press secretary, was suddenly attacked online when she didn't repeat his talking points word for word. Even Mike Pence, his own vice president, wasn't spared. Trump turned on him so aggressively that the nation watched rioters storming the Capitol chanting threats against Pence, and Trump didn't lift a finger. The pattern is unmistakable. Loyalty to Trump is never protection. It's temporary insurance, and it expires the second someone hesitates, disagrees, or becomes inconvenient. Greene wasn't abandoned because she changed. She was abandoned because she stopped being a weapon he could control. If there's one part of Greene's resignation video that stunned even veteran political analysts, it was the way she described the atmosphere inside Trump's orbit. She didn't talk about policy disagreements or ideological splits. She talked about fear, the quiet, suffocating pressure that hangs over anyone who dares to step out of line. For years, Republicans have whispered about this dynamic behind closed doors, but Greene said the quiet part out loud. She compared her situation to being a battered wife, a metaphor so raw and so charged that it sent shockwaves through the entire political world. She was describing a relationship built not on loyalty or respect, but on intimidation and punishment. And she wasn't exaggerating. Lawmakers know exactly what happens when Trump decides someone is the enemy. They face online harassment. They get flooded with threats. They're targeted with primary challengers funded by millionaire donors. Conservative media personalities turn them into villains overnight. Even their families sometimes get dragged into the chaos. This isn't hypothetical, it's documented, it's real. And Greene made it clear she'd lived it firsthand. Rep. Jasmine Crockett echoed the same warning, saying threats from Trump's supporters are not just rumors, they're constant. She noted that people inside Congress are afraid to cross him because they know his base can turn vicious in an instant. And when Trump gives the slightest signal of disapproval, the dogpile begins. Some GOP insiders, speaking anonymously, have said similar things. that they desperately want to speak up, but the risk is too high. Rumors suggest more Republicans feel trapped inside a political machine that demands absolute devotion and punishes anyone who shows even a moment of independence. Greene's resignation didn't just expose tension with Trump. It exposed a culture of fear running through her entire party. A culture powerful enough to keep even the boldest figures silent until someone finally breaks. For years, Donald Trump's political movement looked untouchable. It didn't matter how chaotic things got. It didn't matter how many scandals hit the headlines. MAGA held together through everything because fear, loyalty, and raw political momentum kept the machine running. But Greene's resignation exposed something deeper. The cracks inside the coalition are no longer small. They're spreading, and you can see those fractures everywhere. In Congress, Republicans who once followed Trump without hesitation have started defying him in ways that would have been unthinkable 2 years ago. Members of both the House and Senate voted to release the Epstein files, despite fierce objections from some of Trump's key allies. Not because they suddenly grew a conscience, but because they saw the political writing on the wall. Trump's poll numbers have begun slipping with independents. Donor frustration is rising. Conservative strategists privately warn that the movement feels unstable and directionless. Some Republican governors have quietly distanced themselves to protect their own political futures. Even within MAGA, factions are forming, each claiming to be the real version of the movement. The unity Trump once commanded by fear is weakening. Insiders say members of Congress are exhausted by the nonstop chaos. They're tired of governing through threats and intimidation. And after watching Greene, the most loyal fighter of them all, get discarded, many believe they could be next. What makes Greene's exit so dangerous for Trump is that she wasn't a moderate breaking away. She wasn't a critic. She wasn't part of the old Republican establishment. She was MAGA to the core. And if she walked away, it signals to others that breaking ranks is no longer unthinkable. The coalition isn't collapsing yet. But it's wobbling. You can feel it. You can see it. You can hear it in the shaky voices of Republicans who suddenly don't sound as confident as they once did. Greene's resignation wasn't just a personal decision. It was a warning that the foundation of the MAGA movement is shifting. When the dust settles and the headlines fade, Marjorie Taylor Greene's resignation will stand as something far bigger than a single politician stepping down. It marks a turning point, a crack in a political machine that once looked invincible. Because this wasn't just a resignation, this was a breakup, a rebellion, a warning flare shot straight into the center of the MAGA universe. Greene didn't just leave Washington, she left a message behind, one loud enough to echo for years. She exposed a movement where loyalty is demanded but never returned. She exposed a political culture built on fear instead of trust. She exposed the pressure, the threats, and the suffocating expectation of total obedience. And she exposed the reality that inside this machine, no one, absolutely no one, is safe from being discarded. For years, MAGA survived on the illusion of unity. But Greene's exit proves that even its strongest pillars can crumble when pushed too far. If someone as loyal, vocal, and devoted as she was can walk away and call out the system from the inside, then the myth of unbreakable loyalty falls apart instantly. But her story doesn't end here. Greene positioned herself not as a defeated politician, but as a survivor reclaiming her own voice. Whether she plans to run for Senate, aim for the presidency, or rebuild her influence from the outside, one thing is undeniable. She's not finished, not even close. And that's what makes her departure so explosive. Because if the most loyal soldier in Trump's army has abandoned the battlefield, then the movement itself is no longer untouchable. The cracks are visible, the fractures are spreading, and the future of the Republican Party now hinges on a question that no one knows how to answer. What happens when the empire starts losing its own knights? Greene's resignation wasn't an ending. It was the first sign of a storm still gathering.